You watching the live stream, and welcome especially to our esteemed panel to discuss unexpected allies, accelerating food systems transformation through transformative partnerships. I'm Jenny Davis-Peccoud, a partner with Bain and Company and leader of our global sustainability practice. I'm going to ask each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves, and then we can start in with the conversation.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks for having us on the panel. Max Dubison. I lead sustainability policy and engagement for Indigo Agriculture.
Barry Martin. I'm with Rabobank, and I'm chairman of DLL.
Abanti Shankar Narayanan. I lead Group Public Affairs for the Mahindra Group, India.
Hi everyone, I'm Rob Cameron, Global Head of Public Affairs and ESG Engagement at Nestlé.
Hi everyone, my name is Murilo Parada. I am CEO for the company in Brazil, but also responsible for sustainability on the corporate level globally.
Fantastic. Now, I don't need to tell this group that global food and ag is 30% of emissions, 70% of water withdrawals, 80% of people living in extreme poverty, and 100% of the food we eat. And so it clearly is something that we need to tackle and get to grips with. Now, anybody who's sat in on any been following COP, food and ag is now on the agenda. There has been a lot of announcements. We've had the Emirati Declaration bringing food and ag into the NDC process. We've had the Action on Regenerative Landscapes, launched by WBCSD and others. We've had the First Movers Coalition for Food. So lots of things going on. And in all of those conversations, there are two phrases that keep coming back. Number one, it's a journey. And number two, no one can do it alone. So we really want to unpack the second one and explore what does it mean to not do it alone? What does it mean to get into partnerships? And particularly what we're calling unexpected allies. So those partnerships, which may not be the typical customer, supplier, NGO doing something interesting in the agri-value chain. I'm just going to give you two quick examples of some unexpected alliances that we've been involved in. One is called Tract.org. This is a coalition or a collaboration between four of the largest agri-traders, Olam, LDC, ADM, and Cargill, but also supported by a whole range of other agri-traders, as well as downstream consumer products companies, as well as finance institutions like Rabobank. Essentially, they've said, it's really annoying. We get asked 25 different ways for data, 25 different ways to report, and we don't want to kind of mess around with all that. We just like to have one way that we can do it so we can provide transparency and then spend the rest of our time delivering on our actual commitments and delighting our customers. And so they formed this organization. It went live in September as a venture build, and now really working to scale. The second unexpected alliance is Pacific Island Tuna. This was a collaboration between the Nature Conservancy, the Republic of the Marshall Islands, and eventually Walmart to put radically more sustainable tuna on the shelf for Walmart's private label tuna. What that means is it can't be more expensive, even though it is radically more sustainable. And this unexpected alliance helped them really disrupt and change the value chain to free up money to invest in sustainability while keeping it affordable for the consumer. So those are two unexpected alliances, but you don't want to hear very much more from me. We want to hear from our panelists. And so I'm going to start, Rob, with you. Nestlé's been in the alliance game a long time, but would love to hear some examples, maybe one, because we're all going to keep it short, an example of what are you experimenting with or seeing succeed from an unexpected allies perspective?
Yeah, thanks very much. It's one. If you want one, I would probably pick the landscape enterprise networks, actually. Yeah. This is a regenerative landscapes initiative that's been set up that seeks to find ways in which you truly can do what we all talk about, as well as it's a journey and can't do it alone, is stacking incomes for farmers. And what we're doing with Lens is that we're working with all the actors in a given landscape. So rather than it just being our peers, like the PepsiCos of this world, for example, in the east of England, we're also working with the local water company. And it's the local water company that's paying the farmers a huge amount of money, relatively speaking, because they're not having to spend money cleaning up the runoff because they're using far less pesticides, far less synthetic fertilizers, far less nitrogen running into the watercourses. So from Anglian Water's point of view, it's a much better thing to pay farmers not to do that, so that farmers are getting the additional income stream. And I would never have imagined in a million years that we would be finding a way in which we would be working with a water company that's helping to drive regenerative agriculture in a very pragmatic way.
I love that example. We all talk about needing to get more funding in, and usually people look downstream to the Nestle's of the world and say, will you pay us more? And actually finding some unexpected allies to contribute to that. I actually have told that story about 10 times in the past few days, Rob, since you told it to me. So thank you for sharing it here. Max, I'm going to turn to you now. Some may consider Indigo an unexpected ally, but I'm sure you've got a good story or example of what you've seen work from this perspective.
Sure, yeah. I mean, partnerships are core to what we do, and we expand our programs through partners. And as I was thinking about this, I think, to me, one of the most interesting ones is when we are thinking about farmers transitioning to regenerative, often there's some financing they need up front. Well, we provide carbon finance, which doesn't usually come up front. It's carbon credits come later. We're not necessarily able to pay all the agronomic costs. And so we've been looking for partners for that. And we ended up in March of this year launching a partnership with Farmer Mac. So the Federal Agricultural Mortgage Corporation. So farmers in a certain part of the U.S. can sign up in this program. If they're eligible, they're part of the carbon program, doing regenerative practices, then receive a 1/4 percentage point rebate on their mortgage for 3 years. And so this is now money that can start coming back to them immediately to help them with that transition as they go.
Very good, very good. Barry, I'm sure you've got some stories like that as well, which you can share in a bit. Now, I promise not to ask the exact question to all of the panelists. Does anybody else want to chip in with an example of an unexpected Abanti?
Okay, so the example of an unexpected ally is of a climate think tank, which, India, fortunately, is one of those countries which is right now reasonably food secure, and we don't have to import our food, though we are 1.5 billion people. But for us, the impact of climate change on agri, therefore, is a future risk which we are anticipating. And we realized that we wanted to map out and understand the risk in a certain granular way, but we didn't have the internal capability to do so. And so we reached out and started working with the Environmental Defense Fund, EDF, to actually build our understanding as well as to map out what might be the extent of climate change risk and what parts of agriculture and therefore the Mahindra portfolio might it impact and what could be potential solutions. So that's just one example of a think tank, climate think tank as a partner that we actually use to build our understanding.
Barry's getting ready to say something.
Yes, I am. And the reason is that maybe I give an example which is not food and agri.
Okay.
And the reason is because there was a big regulatory change in the US some time ago. And that said that if you are owning a bank anywhere in the world, you need to comply to the same standards than in the US for Know Your Customer.
Okay.
Imagine what that means in Africa or in India or in places, it's impossible. So, and we all know that access to finance is the #1 issue for climate change, right? And so what we have done is that, considering the problem, we actually we went to the Dutch government and the Norwegian government and said, can we together not find a way actually to improve access to finance in Africa instead of going with everybody going away of Africa because you cannot comply to the CDD or the Know Your Customer standards. So what we have done there is actually to team up with them, create a 1 billion actually fund, and we started to buy actually shares in local banks in Africa, capitalize them, make sure that they improve their governance, etc., and actually develop savings. Because at the end, the issue is not having dollars, but having local currency to be able to develop and finance local value chains. So that's what we have done. We are now 10 years in that program, and then has been extremely successful. And actually, it's grows. Yeah, I think that's another example, because we also have to think about the social. The access to finance is actually the way to go for the solution.
Yeah, so some really cool examples. We've heard about financing, we've heard about think tanks, we've heard about local water boards. And of course, those are not organizations that companies typically partner with. And so my guess is there's some dilemmas that come when you do that. It may be you've got a misalignment of objectives. It may be a misalignment of timing. It may be a question about economics and who's kind of funding this partnership. So Murilo, you'll be no stranger to these, but I'm going to give you the tricky question of not just an example, but of a dilemma that you faced as you've been trying to get these partnerships going. And I will follow it up with a question of, are they the same dilemmas as you see in your normal partnerships, or actually is it different because it's a new set of players that you're engaging with?
Yeah, okay. So it's interesting because when you mentioned that 30% of the emissions coming from agriculture, if you take from agri-food, right? If you take deforestation within that one is circa a third, so 10% is according to land use change. So we as a company, I mean, we are having implementing a policy that is supply chain free of deforestation globally, is on everywhere. And one thing is just to be excluding people from the supply chain, but actually you need to be compensating the farmers that are actually bringing them to the center of the equation to be providing solutions to them. And what we saw is that, I mean, as a company, we can do individual projects, so we try to create those incentives, and that's one way to do, and you reach certain impact. So I think maybe bridging from the previous question to this one, unexpected ally became our competitors. Yeah. So we partner with other of 5 big trading companies to be having a landscape approach to the solution instead of having an individual company, because then you can scale. So we created a program which is called Farmers First Cluster, where we actually go to the very high risk areas when the spot on the most of the deforestation is taking place, to be creating common projects in those areas, and then we can be attracting people to be contributing to those. And I think that has been a very successful story, to be able to create a vehicle and to be engaging not only as an individual company on the impact, but on a whole landscape approach. We're doing that particular to Brazil in this particular case as a pilot, as a country as a pilot, but we really believe that we can be scaling this up on that one. And I think that's what I would like to share here.
Yeah, so trying to defuse some of the competition. Abanti, I'm going to come back to you in the Environmental Defense Fund, because sometimes people might think, wow, that an NGO, and really, is that going to work? What did you find? Were there any dilemmas in that partnership, and how did you get through those?
So the good thing was that they came with expertise and knowledge which we did not have. So that was clearly very value additive. But the dilemma came when we wanted to move to the next stage of granularity and detail, to understand exactly by state, by district, in a large country like India, what was the extent of climate risk on agriculture and the impact. And that's when their issue was that they didn't have enough resource, being a not-for-profit on the ground in India. Neither did they have the granular understanding to interpret and sort of arrive at conclusions. And we just got around it honestly by saying, okay, for this next stage then, this piece of work has to be actually led by the business, right, with support from you, versus vice versa earlier. And how did that work when you unleashed this NGO on the business? Yeah, our business a little bit. So, yeah. No, I think, so the good thing is that the business was exposed to EDF in the first stage, and EDF built credibility during that stage. And therefore, the acceptance of them coming in was far more. But without that, to suddenly have a climate organization sitting within a business to do some work would have been, oh my God, what are they going to come with or add to our knowledge, because we understand, the market and the context much more than they do.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting in what you said, lots of interesting things, but one point is the scaling capacity sometimes of other players can be quite constrained. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more from the group around scaling. I'm going to start, Murillo, it looks like you want to go, so you go first, and then I'm going to ask a few others.
Yes. No, and maybe I'm taking the same example, right? Because I think one of the dilemma on the scale on this one, for example, in this vehicle, we created the vehicle, the financial, and the partnerships with all the NGOs to be able to deploy. So I think that the challenge now is how to be financing, and I think, one of the challenge that is how to be building trust across the whole supply chain. And I would say even not only from our clients to be able to be contributing to be financing to that one, to be able to do, but as well from banks and donors, because, and I think to be able to scale, if once we identify the problem, we created a vehicle to be impacting, you can measure, but how then to be bringing the coordination of multi-stakeholder to be able to finance. And then I think that is one thing that is preventing to be scaling that up. And I think, transparency on the supply chain is going to be helping traceability, but the dilemma is still there to be who pays the bill. I think that's something that is preventing us to be going to further scale.
So, Rob, I know you want to say something. Is it about financing, or should we come to the banker first and then?
It's not financing, but it is scale.
Okay, so we're going to come to the banker first on financing and scaling some of your activities. Then we're coming back to you on scaling.
I think I would like to give an example of a project that we are doing called Acorn, which actually pays smallholder farmers for their environmental services. And we have been already successfully doing that, 240,000 smallholder farmers on the program. We already issued 250,000 tons of carbon credits into the market, got 35 euros per ton, so a good deal. But now we want to scale it to 10 million. And then you really get, how do you do that, right? So we started, okay, we need to create a fund, 200 million. How do you do that? Because you have the catalytic, you have and then you need governments, USAID, you need the Rockefellers, and then you go to the banks and you know what the problem is? Everybody has different things that they are thinking important. So one wants to have that report, the other one has to that report, want to comply to that government wants that thing. And in the end, you're trying to get 200 million together to scale to 10 million smallholder farmers, but you have to report. I think at this stage, we need to report 1,500 data points how are you going to do that, right? And I think that's one big thing which as long as we don't agree on a set of standards, and I think you mentioned that, right? In how do we report every DFI from the World Bank to FMO, everybody has other things that they think are important, depending on what their government is important. So at the end, you become, what are you doing about it? Right, what are we going to do about it, right? What are we going to report on?
Yeah.
Can we not say that these are 10 important things that we report on? We know what the SDGs are, only report SDGs and let's go.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So work in progress. So we've heard financing, we've heard data and standards. Rob, do you want to tell your scaling story?
Barry and I, we agree on this issue of aligning standards because it's getting in the way of going to scale, quite frankly. But, one thing, leaving aside the differences on standards, I think one thing everybody in this room and probably online would agree on is ending deforestation. Why are we still chopping trees down? It's insane. So how do we end deforestation? And that leads me to an unexpected alliance. Who knew that Nestle has something in common with Airbus? And the reason,
that's a new one.
So what has Airbus and Nestle got to do with tropical commodities? And it's about deforestation. So what we realized was that the old model, the traditional model of standards and certification is fine. It's good. It's up to a point. It's fine. But it doesn't go far enough. You've got a certifier going in on Monday, but what happens on the other 364 days of the year? We know also that if deforestation is occurring in the region in which a farm is situated, the farm we're sourcing from, which is not engaged in deforestation, is at risk. So how do we get across that? Airbus, Starlink satellite systems mean that with a new NEO satellite, we've been doing this actually for a few years now, but the new NEO satellites were involved in that too. And what this means is that we have visibility immediately on where we're sourcing our commodities from, not just in terms of ending deforestation and where we observe that it's occurring in the region, we can move in with those producers that we're working with. It's also a way of monitoring trees growing. So when we're doing reforestation, it's not about planting trees. Who cares about planting trees? What we want to do is grow a forest. It's growing trees. We need to know those trees are still alive 3, 4, 5, 10 years' time. And so we've got the monitoring ability now that we have never had before, thanks to the Starling system.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. Now, a lot of these examples have been in developing markets. And Max, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you about scaling in developed markets, because I know Indigo with Walmart and others are actually providing a big chunk of their highly decarbonized products. What's your secret to scale?
Sure. Well, I don't know if I have a secret. There's certainly challenges that come with it, and the partnership model that we've adopted around Regen Ag is largely around the supply, bringing the farmers into our program. We quickly learned it didn't make sense for Indigo to build a massive field force and go out to farmers, because when we started doing that, they said, "Who the hell are you? Get off my farm. I want to talk to the people I already know." So we partner with the people they already know. So when it comes to that kind of partnership, there's a whole lot of education and enablement required. What we do is highly technical, right? Carbon credits is highly complex, highly technical, and you're dealing with things that are different than normal business, where it's like, you should do this, right? This is the right thing to do. And so you're used to looking at, well, what is required of me? And sometimes the methodologies aren't, clear enough, leave you some wiggle room. And so we're trying to drive that down. And so then as we start to scale these partnerships, they go into new communities, there's new farmers, now there's new commercial teams. It just compounds that education problem and is something that we have to really stay on top of. And so, I think additionality is a good example. It's when it comes from my sort of ivory tower policy world of these are the additionality rules. It goes through a lot of links in the chain before it gets to somebody on the field who has a sales quota. It's bring in all the acres you can bring in. And so how do we make sure that the training that goes into that reflects the ideals of the market? So
financing, standards, data, technology, training, lots of challenges, dilemmas in terms of scaling, but also some solutions starting to emerge. Now, I want to take a different look at it, though, because failure is very popular these days, and we're all learning from failure and embracing failure and failing fast and failing forward. Hopefully not at this conference. We've had enough of that back in Copenhagen, but I want to hear about some failures up here, failures and unexpected alliances. What went wrong, and what did you learn from that? So, Rob, I'm going to put you on the spot first. Tell us about a failure.
How many do you want?
Just one for now.
Right.
And if it's really good, we might ask you for another one. This is actually a bit of a personal one. Some years ago now, I was chief exec at Fair Trade International, the fair trade organisation headquartered in Bonn. And just around the time that I joined Fair Trade, my current employer, not then, Nestlé, wanted to figure out how it could get into the fair trade world. So it was agreed that there would be the launch of a new brand called Partners Blend. Anybody heard of Partners Blend? Sounds like a coffee.
It's a coffee. It's a coffee, and the reason why you haven't heard of it is because it doesn't exist anymore. Hence, it was a failure. And what we found was a couple of things, and I could observe this from kind of both sides of the fence, as it were, as things time rolled on. So basically, Nestlé didn't want to do something with its other brands. What it wanted to do was to create something sort of ground up, and that made sense in one regard, but it was rather inexperienced at the time, and Fair Trade was so excited at the idea of working with Nestlé that it decided it would do that too, and so created this brand. But because you're trying to do brand building in what is already an incredibly competitive market with established brands, it just never got off the ground. So it ended up with a bit of a failure, and it was a bit of a breakdown in relationship, truth be told. And what we learned was that the best way forward when it comes to these sorts of consumer-facing brands is that what we need to do is to work to improve the brands that already already exist and are known and loved by consumers. That is actually the best way to go to get the kind of impact that we want to see, which is what led ultimately to Nestle doing Fair Trade Kit Kat, which we now don't do. So that's another example.
Hopefully it's not another failure.
There's a reason why we did that as well, which is that we ended up doing something which I think is even better, which is the Cocoa Income Accelerator. Yeah. But there were lessons learned all along the way there, and I bear the scars of pretty much all of them.
Okay, very good, very good. So that's a failure from the downstream. Murillo, I'm going to put you on the spot. Then I'm going to see if any of you three want to share a failure. But tell us one from...
it's like Rob. I mean, the failures, we have a long list. So, but I think the biggest failure we have as a company and all these partnerships is to be really believing that the carbon market will be doing the job to be able to be correctly pricing and creating the mechanism to scale the programs that we have. Because if you take on the farming community, if you ask somebody to be providing environmental service compared to what they'll be making just providing food, producing food, the certification of the carbon market, which is 30 years on avoided deforestation, for example, or even the price is not there. And I think all the way we have been trying to be certifying the supply chain, measuring the carbon, and to be using the carbon as let's say, the currency to be able to transfer that across the supply chain, to be able to finance and create a mechanism. And that was a failure because it didn't happen. So I think the lesson learned from that one is not going to be, unfortunately, at least for the short-term future, the typical REDD plus avoided deforestation that will be creating the right incentives. So you have to be much more creative, bringing other elements of nature, social, to be able, and more partnerships around this one to be able to create the right incentive, and that's the lesson learned.
Interesting. So, Murillo, I am going to have to ask you this follow-up question. Do you believe the carbon market has a role to play in the transition, or do you think it is something that you're going to make a lot of progress on transition and then we need the carbon market for parts of it?
I think it's key, and ultimately, we are here at COP. If you take only the climate, forget everything else, I think it has to be the solution, right? At one point in time, I think the currency that could be right pricing, what is the climate service that is being provided, has to be measured in carbon units. Yeah. So I do believe on that one. But I think we're far to be having that develop enough and correctly price enough. And I think even more important is the timing on the certification of that one. To be expecting anybody to be committing with 30 years on a reforest, it's fine. On an avoided deforestation is a no-go to a farmer. And I think that's the evolution that I'm still a real believer on that one, but we need transition to more creative solutions on that one.
Yeah, so when do you need it and how are you going to use it? And also then, you can't rely on that only. There's going to be other things you have to do. Now, Banti, I'm going to come to you. Feel free to share a failure if you'd like. Otherwise, I can ask you another question. But.
Well, I guess all of us have lots of failures, but one that I will mention, and that's something that I've seen at Mahindra as well as in my previous roles, is within an industry association, when you have to move certain things which need ecosystemic industry level sort of solutions and actions and
advocacy. No one can do it alone.
Sorry?
No one can do it alone.
Nobody can do it alone. But within an industry association, it's often hard because it's a motley cast of characters, right? And different members of an association just have different objectives, different degrees of, deep pockets, and quite honestly, different visions on stuff like, sustainable actions, etc. So finding that common ground, it can sometimes be really, really hard. So I see that in a couple of associations that we are part of now. And so it can lapse into the lowest common denominator. Yeah. And then you are left to do your own thing more unofficially as an informal coalition with 2 or 3 like-minded players. That's how you kind of solve that problem. Yeah. But it would be so much better if you could have one voice.
It's interesting because that's almost like a traditional alliance. And some of the barriers to that, and then actually needing to find that, and it plays a role, but how do you get beyond it?
So the unexpected alliance is really an informal coalition of like-minded parties.
So look, partnerships are hard. Nobody can do it alone. Partnerships are hard. So would love love to talk a little bit now about what else is required to make partnerships work. And there's going to be some things that you need to change inside the company, and there's going to need to be some things that you have to change outside the company. Now, Max, your role is outside the company, so would love your thoughts just to start. Externally, are there things that need to change to really enable these unexpected alliances to work? And is it regulation? Is it a different view on anti-competitive constraints? Or what are you seeing?
Sure. So there's two things that come to mind for me. The first one kind of gets back a little bit to the enablement that I was talking about. So, but not just enablement of the partners, but actually of all the different seats at the table, all the different partnerships. So we find, you look at the farmers, they need to understand the regenerative practices that's being expected of them, but also a little bit about what it's like to participate in a carbon market program, because it can be shocking to many of them. You want data? I thought you wanted me to plant cover crops, right? I'm not sitting at my computer, I'm out in the field. But also then the scientists that we work with, and those that are just observing the market, may not have a full understanding of the methodologies and actually how things get implemented in these carbon projects. And, we've seen plenty of sort of criticism of regenerative agriculture as a solution that's based on some misunderstandings of actually what's happening. Sometimes it's as simple of, well, no, you can't quantify that at a field level, but that's not what everybody's doing. We're quantifying it at, hundreds of thousands, millions of acres. And then also the standards bodies. We've spent a lot of energy helping them understand agriculture. And it's not a factory. It's not, it's not renewable energy. It's messy. It's dynamic. It's a living system. So that's a big external enabler. And then the other, much more specific one, I think, would be data sharing. Particularly in what we do, running biogeochemical models, we need a significant amount of existing published data to validate the models, validate the performance, quantify uncertainty. And when you start to look at it globally, it can be hard to find all the data you need. And sometimes you think it's probably out there, but maybe your science team doesn't speak or read the right language or doesn't know the right universities to reach out to. And it's the kind of thing of, rising tide lifts all boats. If all of the people working in this space could come together and partner in a way to share and distribute these data sets, it would really go a long way.
Barry, do you want to jump in? Share some of your
yes,
thoughts.
I actually would like to add two comments. The first one is you need to start having the idea of an ecosystem. And what we do too much is that we try from one organization to think that you can give the full solution. But actually, if you think about ecosystems, say, okay, this is what I bring. Look, Rabobank brings knowledge and finance and maybe networks. But let's say if you talk about smallholder farmers, you also need to bring health, you need to bring education, you need to bring a lot of other things to table, let's say counseling, the gender issues. So, but this is not, so you need to what we really saw is that if you have to go into the idea of creating ecosystem and try to find partners that bring the things that you need for the ecosystem. And then bring me to the second thing is that I've noticed that the most successful projects are the ones that we spend a lot of time actually in governance in the beginning.
Yeah, that's such a great point.
And how do you communicate, how you do governance, how you take decisions? Because a lot of those projects start, let's do a nice project and do the ecosystem, but we forget about the beginning.
Yeah.
And the reality is that I now, when I do a project, I actually spend the beginning, nice idea, but how are we going to manage this? What is the governance? And most of the time, the best thing is even to have a board or something like that to manage the board governance with certain let's say, independence, if I may say so. Yeah. Otherwise, those alliances don't work because like we are as a bank, we are a very as a bank is, right? So we are kind of so you need right. So you need to organize.
Nimble, I'm sure.
So my suggestion is clear idea about what ecosystem you want to build, as you said. But the second is time for governance.
Okay, so governance is true on the external, but actually, what about internal? Because I mean, all of your companies are big, unwieldy, global behemoths between regions, functions, brands, etc. So, what do you need internally to make these unexpected alliances work? Who wants to comment, Rob?
Take a run at that one. Almost in the same as it's a journey and no one can do it alone. Change in mindset would be another one to add to that list.
That's another good one.
but I think there is something in that, and I maybe could expand on it a little bit. Change in mindset as in make the future the cause of the present. Make the future you want to see the cause of the present day actions is a great start point for finding what the common objectives are rather than the past enmities that often exist in our space. And that can be true across peers and competitors. It could be true between corporates like ours and NGOs. But I think that's the question to ask to find those common objectives. And there's a very specific example that EDF actually has kicked off today. If you'd said to me a couple of years ago that we'd be sitting on a podium with Kraft Heinz, I'd have probably looked at you as if you were bonkers because, whilst there is a certain sort of, I don't know, with our friends at Danone or with our friends at PepsiCo, we rub along. But Kraft Heinz is not a company that has rubbed along with Nestle particularly well. And that's probably more to do with us than them, but it's the case, right? And yet there we are. And Lactalis USA would be another example. All of those companies that except PepsiCo, all the companies that I've just named are part of the new Dairy Methane Action Alliance that was launched thanks to EDF and thanks to the US Department of Agriculture today. Another one to add to the list of many announcements. It's a big deal. And it's a big deal to get that crowd in a room together and saying, you know what, the future we want to see in dairy is so important that we have to find a way to work together. And with the help of John Kerry and others, there's a huge amount of work that's been done on, to Barry's point, the governance, which has had our legal team going, what the heck, it's only an agreement. No, we have to get this right. And I think it's a really, really big announcement. So unexpected allies with some great components in there.
Thank you for highlighting that. So look, last call for anything you need to change within your companies to make these unexpected alliances work. So mindset. Barry?
Well, one very important thing, Summer, is we have a tendency as humankind, when you have one failure, to make that a generalization. And that's very important. So sometimes the 1% failure, maybe sometimes it's more than that, becomes the 99% of the good things. So I think that mindset is extremely important within your organizations. Okay, that 1% should not be the generalization of all the 99%.
Yeah, and Murillo.
It's just taking on what you just mentioned, right? We do have in the company, for example, a venture capital fund, which we're expecting that, out of those investment theses, not all of them will be succeeding. So there is room to be doing that one. I think on the sustainability, I think for us, it's not exactly the same approach, but I think we have to be doing a very good job in defining priorities first, because for example, when we took a survey in our company to all employees and all external stakeholders will be important to us, we came across 23 items. We cannot handle 23 items. So we prioritize 5. But out of those 5, the investment thesis need to be on them, and we need to allow failure, to Barry's point. So I think we will not be able to be deploying all these initiatives, and all of them are going to succeed. So we need to be ready to be accepting losses in one of them, failures, but not giving up and keep on, as long as on the right thesis where we wanted to pursue.
Yeah, and one that I would add is not just allowing failure, but actually shutting stuff down. Because there's just so many pilot projects that are out there that just keep going, and they stay small, and just say, no, we need to find the ones that are going to scale, shut the other ones down. The winner of the FT Book Award was announced today, and it is about failure. So anybody looking for a Christmas present, you can check out what that is. Look, we could keep going for a while, but I'm actually going to turn to the audience and see if there are questions out there. Will, I see you in the background. Now, Will is the CEO of TechnoServe, you have lots of great experience in alliances and unexpected alliances. So would love to hear anything you'd like to add, and then questions also from the rest of the group.
Thanks. Sorry. For the camera. Thank you, Jenny. We are fortunate in doing more and more work with both agricultural companies and food companies around transforming their supply chains and making them more regenerative. And this is now the number one thing we're asked to do in the advisory part of our business, which is great. But the challenges, I think, is in doing this in a way which delivers on the company's desires to meet their climate goals, while at the same time addressing the needs of the smallholder that's often involved. And those, quite understandably, are more yields and earning more money. And so I apologize for coming in late to this. It's impossible to find, like many things here. But I guess my question to the panel, and you answered it a bit, your point on governance, I think, speaks to it a bit. But if there's anything more on how to design partnerships and coalitions which get the balance right between the objectives of the companies and their important climate goals that they need, but treat the smallholders' needs, because if the smallholders aren't doing well in all of this, it's never going to scale and it's never going to last.
Yeah, so farmer-centric models. So I'm sure everybody wants to jump in, but Rob, do you want to go?
Yeah.
Abanti, it'd be interesting
just
to hear
goes back
from
to
you
this
as
point
well.
about mindset. I think everybody in this room will have heard repeatedly, we've got to get across climate, that's why we're all here. And we need to address nature. Yeah, we've really got to address nature, dead right. And it's got to be a just transition. That's the normal thread, right? Is everybody nods? Yeah, okay. We've got to turn that right round. We have to turn that round. We have to start the other way round. We have to say, we are going to support and enhance farmer livelihoods by addressing climate change and resolving nature crises.
Yeah, love it.
In order to secure those livelihoods and resilient farms for the future. That's a mindset shift that we need to start doing. So frankly, I'm sick and tired of hearing about again and again, we've got to do this, we've got to do that, and it's got to be a just transition. The reason why we're in this mess is because we didn't think about people's livelihoods in the first place.
Yeah, Abanti, I don't know if you want to comment, but of course Mahindra's mission is Rise and helping India rise and the farmers with it.
Absolutely. And therefore, I would say that, in the case of Mahindra, we like to say, and we actually believe in it, is that purpose drives, profit. And therefore, when we look at our role in agriculture, regen agriculture is one of our sustainability goals. We actually frame it as both regen agriculture, but also increasing productivity and farmer income. And we completely recognize that the latter has to happen for it to scale. And therefore, with that, a lot of things follow. How we set up the program, what we measure, how do we communicate back to farmers, etc., etc. So, yeah.
Yeah, great. Other questions from the group? Okay, lady with the hat.
Hi, everyone.
Hang on one second. We're going to give you a mic.
Hi, I'm Heather Terry. I own a company in the United States called Good Sam Foods, and we work with farmers directly on the ground in regenerative systems. I'd like to know from all of you, you're working with a lot of smallholder farmers in the same sense that a smaller organization like we are. We do a lot of active listening, indigenous community, smallholder farmers. I'd like to know from all of you, how much of that active listening are you doing on the ground with farmers? How often are they involved around the table? Because that seems to be a massive deficit in the larger scale companies.
Well, not all, because we promise we're not going to have every panelist answer every question, but Marilla's ready to go, and then I think, Barry, you want to jump in.
Look, I mean, our business is actually to be buying products from the farmers. So if the farmers are not succeeding, we fail. So I think talking with the farmers is the essence of what we do, and to hear what is the solution for them. So I think I will take in a little bit on what Rob mentioned before. For us in LDC, it's much more difficult to be explaining to a lot of the consumers downstream, Nestle is an exception probably, but to a lot of the banks, even sometimes to the NGOs, what the farmers want. And even to people, I mean, NGOs are looking purely from a nature and environmental aspect of that one. Because, I mean, we want to tell everything that we can put on a white paper if it's not addressing what the farmer wants, and we only can know what the farmer wants if we hear them, and that's going. And you mentioned the smallholder ones, and I would turn that around a little bit, that it's not only the smallholder farmers, it's any farmer, because I think to some of the topics, what they are asking is the same. Some cases are not, but in some cases is exactly the same what the farmer needs. And I mean, so we must listen to them, and we do pay. We do invest a lot of time in listening what they have to say, so otherwise we cannot bring the right solutions.
Right. Barry, do you want to share a bit?
Yes, I think that the point is very relevant, and therefore what we have done as Rabobank, as you know, we finance farmers in all continents, with exception of one, is that we have created client councils. So we have in every region in the world several client councils. So I just came back from New Zealand, for instance, and there we have 8 client councils, and we organize all our clients like that. Also for the smallholder farmers is that we only do projects which actually where the farmers are organizing cooperatives. And that's the way, respecting the entrepreneurship of the farmer, organizing them in cooperatives. We fund those cooperatives. We actually support those cooperatives because that's where the voice of the farmers. I can tell you one thing. Coming from the Netherlands, I will never be able to understand everything what an African farmer needs, or let's be very honest, in one of those regions, even within this many regions. So you need to organize them in the cooperatives and try to understand and support the cooperatives so that it can deploy what indigenous people need. It's not an easy thing, but I truly believe as a cooperative bank that this enabling emancipation of actually the farmers and the associations is the most important thing that we have to do.
Yeah, I'm just going to share a personal story for myself, because I was at an event last year, and there was a farmer there, and he said, you know, people keep talking down to us like, oh, we have to change, we have to change. He goes, listen, if somebody had told me 30 years ago I'd be running this place with 2 people and a tractor, you know, connected to a satellite, like I never would have believed him. And of course, that's what I'm doing. So don't talk to me about, you know, needing to change and being flexible. Like, you know, let's now start from that common ground, and we can kind of move on from there. That was a very humbling moment for me. We've got a question in the back. Who's got the mic?
Hi, I'm Simi Thambi. I'm from FAIR Initiative. FAIR Initiative works with investors, and we create more awareness about the livestock industry. We work with all kinds of proteins. So my question is to you, Rob. You mentioned, of course, you know, the new pledge, which is transformational. I wanted to understand what are some lessons from that alliance which can maybe be replicated towards other proteins, such as beef, which is very high emission intensive, and we would definitely like to see similar alliances for other key, you know, companies that also emit so much methane. Any lessons to learn?
Well, the Dairy Methane Action Alliance that I mentioned literally launched today. So we can tell you how well the launch went and learn the lessons and doing it better next time. But it's too early on that one specifically. But I think that your general point is a very valid one, you know, that there are a lot of alliances out there. And I think that when it comes to animal proteins, there's a couple of things maybe that are worth reflecting on. Firstly, I think that we've got a little bit caught up in a binary situation that it's either vegetarian or it's animal protein. Now, we're doing a huge amount of work ourselves on transitioning out of animal proteins. But one of the ways in which we're looking at this is reducing in ingredients the volume of animal proteins, replacing with some vegetable proteins. So that kind of ingredient blending a little bit, because one of the things that's most important in this is, and this is for us not in terms of alliances so much, is making sure that you bring consumers with you. Because if we don't bring consumers with us, it's really, really difficult to drive change. But what we also, just to kind of round the point up, going back to where you started from, we have to look at the portfolio. We can't do this just by making the existing portfolio better. There will need, I mean, and you can look at our net zero roadmap, and there is a component of it that is about portfolio change. So that issue of animal and plant proteins is very relevant, and it'll probably need collaboration to get there.
Okay, last question from the floor. Ethan, over to you, and then maybe we'll sneak one in. One more.
Hi there.
Why don't you take them both? Yeah. Ethan, you go. Just, shout.
Hello.
There you go.
Hi, Ethan Soloviev, Chief Innovation Officer at How Good. We're a sustainability data company for the food industry. My question is, what is the role of data and data transparency in forging these allyships, especially the unexpected ones?
Who wants to go? Max?
Yeah, so on the supply partnership side, one of the biggest partners we've forged is with Corteva. So, and actually that one was kind of unexpected as well because we were essentially competitors. They were building a carbon program, we were building a carbon program. But by keeping sort of open hearts and minds or whatever and continuing to stay connected with each other, we eventually came to realize, hey, you do one thing really well, we do this other thing really well, let's get together and run a carbon program. But it involves giving them a massive amount of data about what's happening. They're enrolling all these farmers, and then we're taking in all their data, we're validating the data, we're running the models, we're doing all the quantification. So then we need to sit them down each year and go back through, of all your enrollments, these types of farmers, these were some problems that you were having, these are the results that we're having, these are, in this region, these types of practices were performing well. In these regions, these types of practices are not, and helping them understand how to give advice to farmers, helping them understand how to train their sales team, helping them understand where things just broke down in the business and the operations. And it's a lot of time and energy goes into it, but it's always worth it.
Based on data. All right, I am going to take this last question, then I'm going to ask each of our panelists to have one top tip for making these unexpected alliances work, and then I'm going to ask Diane Holdorf to give us a very quick summary of some of the key insights that she's taken out. Last question. Keep it brief.
Thank you so much. This was an incredible panel. I wanted to ask about the partnerships of the future. I really like that point about thinking strategically, maybe 10, 15, 30 years. So I know that there are regions in the world, Canada, Russia, the Arctic, that are probably going to have shifts in agriculture as, temperatures or, industries move, such as the wine industry, fishing. Just wanted to ask if you're thinking about developing those partnerships in advance. Thank you.
Wow. Who wants to go? Murillo, you almost looked like you maybe did, so.
Yeah, no. I hope that your statement does not materialize, because if that is a proof that we fail in containing global warming to start with.
Embrace that failure.
So that's to start with. So when you look to where we believe most of the crops will be growing, I think we have three basic regions. I think seeing the marginal growth of production on the type of food that we produce today. Of course, you have a lot of innovation that changes, but we believe as a company it will be mainly coming yet from South America, will be a little bit from Africa, and most of the consumption will be taking place in Asia. So you can take minor proportions, but that's still what we believe. So we're not believers that the expansion of agriculture going to the Baltics, let's put it that way, will be growing to the point to be displacing the existing footprint of food production that we have today on the existing production system. So I don't think we are planning anything in that sense, because we don't see as a mega trend that to be becoming the most important producing region on the planet.
Okay, so 15 seconds each person. What is your top tip for making unexpected alliances successful? Max.
Make sure that the alliance does not rest entirely on one person or one relationship, or that, information is not being properly documented. Make sure it's durable as people move and things change, and you don't want it to just fall apart because, they don't work here anymore.
Create urgency. And SBTI is going to create urgency as we go to the 1.5%. Yeah. So it's going to squeeze us, and we will need to share data so that we can actually know where we are.
Yeah. Abanti.
Clarity of objectives, outcomes, and roles and responsibilities.
It's not just clarity, it's that they're shared across all the partners.
Yeah.
Trust and share, including all transparency, but the cost and the benefit as well, and not try taking from the beginning, lion's share on that one that kills from the beginning.
Great. Diane, you need no introduction, but I would love to hear your final reflections having listened to this fantastic panel.
Great. Hi. This was a fantastic panel, and I always love listening to this crowd, and I thought the questions were awesome as well. I think the speed to scale points that came up are known but need work, right? Finance standards, data, technology, methodologies. This is the core day job, frankly. And this is what we have to really dig in on. It's not the fun, big, sexy announcements, although we need those desperately. It is the core work to get done. So a lot of us are working on that. I really liked in the learning from failures, really apply the learnings to the new solutions that really deliver. I think each of you that talked about those, that was the aha moment that I took away. What did you learn? And then how do you actually design to deliver so that you're not repeating? What does it take to make partnerships successful? I thought the comments on common ground, that ratchet ambition, is actually very compelling. How do you get to those who will actually drive it, that are your partners to mobilize and accelerate, not just get the job done? And this is where I really think that the conversation centered on farmers is so important, and I was so grateful that you raised that. I see this as a massive difference even since last year on the way that the partnership with farmers is front and center, as opposed to even just the engagement or livelihoods conversation. It goes without saying that's critical, but it's a partnership, not a one-way conversation, and that, I think, came out here as well. The successes that formalize governance are really important, and I loved that capitalizing the banks through purchases of shares and designing cooperatives to drive the action on the ground. Just a couple of examples that to me really made that come to life. The stop small. Don't do it. We don't have time. Stop it. Stop the small stuff. And then build these with credibility and trust with your expected ratchet ambitioning allies, but with those that you don't expect as well, like your competitors, because this is pre-competitive. And maybe if you will allow me, since we are having this conversation in the COP and we don't want failure, let me add one key point. I think everybody is very aware that on day one in the World Climate Action Summit, 140 countries signed the UAE Heads of State Declaration. Processes and negotiations have now ground to a halt on agriculture, and we can't allow for that, given this is the food COP. Our partners at the Food and Land Use Coalition have already mobilized a way to call the negotiators to action. There is a link that can be shared. So those of us who are here I did already. That's why I was busy in the corner. But those of us who are ready to sign on to that, to drive the momentum of it, please do so. And this is the role of funding the ag ministers to come to these COPs. Great. And with that, I'll pass it back.
Look, this phrase, no one can do it alone, I have heard it countless times. I can only thank you guys for really bringing it to life, what it means and how to make it successful. This has been dripping with great examples, real honesty and real practicality. So thanks everybody, thanks to all of you, and appreciate the time and insight. Wow, that was